Welcome to Three Questions with Motion Point. I'm your host, Dominic Ditterbide, and today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Walter Boza. Walter is the founder of Collab Hub. Collab Hub is a dynamic network of independent advertising and marketing professionals dedicated to delivering innovative solutions for clients. Walter also has over 20 years of experience as an executive global advertising leader, including his tenure as president of the Hispanic advertising agency, Captura Group. Walter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dominic. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. Thank you very much again. So let's just get right into it.
Let's go.
What is the difference between being multilingual and being multicultural? And why is that difference so important in your experience?
That is a great question because in my experience, there's still a little bit of confusion of what it means to speak a language and what it means to understand a culture, and it has knowing the distinction between the two has big implications in terms of marketing. And let me go back to the theory of what culture is and why it matters. I mean, language is, of course, a component of culture. It's one of the dimensions of culture, but not the only dimension of culture. And while you can make yourself understood if you speak a language, you don't necessarily are connecting on a cultural level. So what I mean by that, in my view, marketing needs to be relevant. Of course, you have to say something that matters to someone. It has to be understandable, and it has to drive action. So those are three main components. While you can be understood by speaking a language, you might be absolutely irrelevant if you don't understand the culture. So while making sure that you are connecting with your audience in language is essential, because if they don't understand you, then you're absolutely irrelevant. You need to make sure as a marketer that you are tapping into cultural nuances, cultural understanding, the value system, the beliefs, the customs, the traditions of a particular audience, in order for you to be relevant for that particular audience. So the two things are essential. You need to be able to speak a language or communicate in a language in order to be understood, but you also need to be able to tap into the cultural understanding of a particular audience if you want to be relevant. So they go together, but they're not the same.
That's a great point. I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier, right? Before the interview started, where it's like, language is kind of like a medium. And just because they understand you doesn't mean that you're resonating with them, right? And there's like that difference. You want to make sure you resonate. You said something brilliant, which is that drives action. And you're going to drive action when you feel that you're talking to somebody that understands who you are, right?
Yeah. And we live in a country that is very unique. This is an experiment that is unique in the history of the humankind. In a country of close to 400 million people, you have so many different cultures that are coexisting, and so many different languages that are spoken within this country, that this is the only country, also because of its size and the size of the marketing budgets, in which multicultural marketing and multilingual marketing are almost a must for any organization that wants to be successful in this country.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from Venezuela, and we only did marketing in Spanish, and although we needed to understand the nuances between the different regions, and we shared the common culture was more or the culture was more shared. So I'm sorry.
No. Well, I was just going to build on it. That makes a lot of sense. It's like multicultural and multilingual marketing are things that are even more important here in the United States, because there's just so many people from so many different parts of the world, and that I don't think that can happen in any other country to the degree where it happens here. I mean, I'm from Mexico, and I would agree with you. Like, we will market in Spanish, but there is like a common understanding of our culture throughout that will resonate. And there's different regionalisms and that, like you were saying as well, for Venezuela, but nothing to do with here, where not only do you have to resonate for different cultures, but that also entails different languages and different regions. And there's just, a different layer of complexity to it. That's fascinating.
So many layers of complexity, as you said, which makes it like interesting and fascinating, because there's not, we're learning. Every day is an opportunity to learn something new about our audiences and the people that we're trying to connect with. And it changes every year. We have an influx of immigrants from Venezuela recently. And that changes the type of that changes a little bit the complexion and of the Hispanic audience in different markets. So it's fascinating, because not only we're seeing all the technological shifts and that affect culture, we're also seeing how immigration patterns affect how we have to do marketing as well. So it's an experiment that it's ongoing as a society, and for the people that work in marketing, like you and me, we need to make sure that we are in touch, in tune with what's going on in society, because otherwise we're going to be wasting our clients' money.
That's a great point. Well, thank you, Walter. That's a great answer. So on to question number 2. I'd love to ask you, why do large corporations struggle to handle, global and multicultural marketing in-house? When they take it in-house and have to do that, why do you think, in your experience, that's so hard to do?
Well, I think number one, it's because it's very hard for one single organization to have a deep understanding of, if you're talking about global marketing, understanding of the different countries that they're marketing in. And in the United States, it's very hard for one organization to have an ear and an eye on the different cultures and subcultures that are coexisting in this country. So I think that's the first layer of hurdle, the first hurdle, that it's very hard for an organization to have representation and understanding of the different people that they want to reach. And in my experience, what I've seen, it has evolved a little bit. I'm not gonna go into like Hispanic marketing right now, because that's most of my multicultural experience in the United States. You either had within the clients Hispanic representation, but who were not marketers, or marketers who had no idea what the Hispanic culture was about. So you either had a person who had a Hispanic background or a Hispanic last name trying to do marketing when that was not their expertise, and then just you need to know marketing, you need to know advertising. It's not just the fact that you're Hispanic or African American or Korean American. It's not just that. You need to be an expert in what you're doing. So what I've seen is an evolution now. You see a little bit more of representation within the clients of the different populations and audiences that they want to reach. And also, this is the second layer, which is a little bit more complex, is the unconscious bias that we all bring to every role. So it is very hard for organizations to take away their blinders, to not only understand the opportunity, but understand how to capitalize on that opportunity. So it's a complex situation. It has evolved. I think more and more clients and organizations are understanding that they need to open up take away their blinders first, and then tap into the resources that truly are experts in communicating with the people that they want to reach. the, so that's why it's hard for an organization's in-house team to be able to connect with everyone, because they are not everyone.
Exactly. No, that's a great point. It's something we see in the translation industry a lot as well, where it's like people will start off translating content and they give it to somebody that speaks Spanish, right? But there's a difference between someone that speaks Spanish and a professional translator or a professional linguist. And in the same light, like it's different for someone that knows that culture to doing marketing for that culture, because you also have to have a core competency of knowing how to do marketing. So it's a balance of that, and it becomes where you just don't have the expertise in house to, spread your wings and wrap them around the entire earth, right? Like,
yeah,
a quote comes to mind, like, our palms don't cover continents, so you have to have help from people that are in those markets and that have experience in those markets. That's a great point, Walter. So want to make sure that we move on to the next topic, which is another great question for someone with so much experience like you, which is, what are some learnings that you formed about marketing to the U.S. Hispanic our audience and market in particular, with the experience that you've had doing marketing for them over the years?
Yeah, so I think number one is that there's not one Hispanic audience. There's 60 million Hispanics, but there's so many subcultures and so many layers of complexity within that population. You're talking about the size of a country. I mean, the Hispanic population in the United States is larger than most entire populations in most Latin American countries. So you're talking about a country that can come from different subcultures. You're from Mexico, I'm from Venezuela. We share a lot of common things. Like if I tell you Juan Gabriel, you know who Juan Gabriel is, and I know who Juan Gabriel is. But your experience growing on in Mexico is slightly different than mine growing up in Venezuela. And now we're coexisting in this country as Hispanics. So that layer of complexity doesn't happen when you're doing marketing like inside Venezuela for Venezuelan population, or in Mexico for the Mexican population. So the number one learning, and I think that's the most important learning, is that there's not just one Hispanic population. You need to, within that population, do a little bit of multicultural marketing as well. So you need to understand what type of population, the composition of that Hispanic population in terms of, country of origin. Not all Hispanics speak Spanish, talking about language and culture, but not all Spanish for the different Hispanic populations is the same. So you need to be very cultural aware and sensitive, even when you're just doing marketing for the Hispanic population. So that to me, if you start there, with also, coming into this not as, because I'm Hispanic, I know it all. No, I'm Hispanic, I'm a marketer, and because I'm Hispanic and I'm a marketer, I need to understand that I don't represent anyone. And if you start there, then you start unpeeling that richness of layers of the Hispanic population. That is, to me, the key to being successful in Hispanic marketing. Not assume that one size fits all. And you have to do your homework also and understand the different segments of the Hispanic population.
Yeah, that's great, and I agree on all points. Specifically, I think that in some cases you're marketing to someone with a U.S. Hispanic culture, but they might prefer to speak in English. So sometimes it doesn't even have to be about language, right? You're talking to a second generation immigrant that's been raised in English their entire life, but they still have, that Hispanic part of them in terms of behavior, like actions and the way that they psychologically react to different messaging. Like, you have to be attuned to that, and that's kind of also goes back to the point of the difference between multilingual and multicultural marketing, right? Like being multicultural and showing that you understand the target market, the target audience, in this case US Hispanics. It's interesting and it's counterintuitive. Sometimes you don't even have to use the Spanish language to do that. You just have to be just aware of how they think and how they
going back to going back to language as a component of culture. I was reading an article not so long ago about the English that's spoken in Miami, which is a different version of English because people kind of translate from Spanish to English. So you would say, I don't live in Miami, but my sister lives in Southern Florida. You would say something like, get down of the car. Because in Spanish you say, bájate del carro, instead of get out of the car, salte del carro. So even if you're speaking English to the Hispanic population that speaks English, you need to be aware of how much of our way of thinking is in Spanish. So it's so rich, and that's why I love what I do. And being multicultural, and being an immigrant, and being able to think and speak in two languages, and raising bilingual, bicultural kids, it's fascinating as a marketer and also as a human.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant, Walter. It's been a pleasure talking to you. This is all great information. I hope we get to do this again. But that does it for 3 Questions with Motion Point. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. And Walter, until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.